Hello, welcome back to another episode of the F1 series in Stripping the Dipping. And today, as usual, I will be joined by my co-host Denzel Clarkson. And we have a guest speaker to help us with the conversation today as well. The first race weekend just ended up with a huge roasting topsy-turvy plot twist, and boy oh boy, that race was definitely something worth re-watching. So as I mentioned, we have a guest today and he's very famous in F1 Twitter. Everyone knows him as Jay and also knows him for the Twitter account Whinger Spice. Just to give a small insight, today we will be talking about HAAS competing for the Constructors' Championship, placing third after yesterday. Can you imagine that? HAAS! While Kevin Magnussen placing fifth. Huge congratulations are in order for them. Ferrari, obviously, they placed the first and second podiums, while Red Bull, neither the team nor the drivers earning any points at all due to the DNF. And Mercedes, with all the issues in the world they had with the cars, placed third and fourth, and Lewis, as usual, making history with his 183 podium. Also, we will be touching the areas of the FIA Human Error Championship and the qualifying sessions. So, stay tuned. So here we are with Denzel and Jay, the Whinger Spies in the house, people. Give us a big applause.
Wait.
How are you guys doing after yesterday? How are you guys doing actually?
Well, pleasantly surprised.
Denzel, how's your situation right there?
Yeah, pleasantly surprised. I'm going to echo Jay's sentiments. What a banger for the first race of the season with these new cars. And yeah, so many talking points. You know, a rookie scoring points on the debut race. The reigning world champion, asterisk star, imploding physically on the track, and his car physically imploding as well. And yeah, lots of scraps in the midfield and unexpected results, and the return of Special K, the Danish Viking, securing P5 for HAAS as well. So lots of good news, good stories there as well.
Since you mentioned it, shall we start with that? HAAS. What do you guys think about HAAS? I mean, they are competing for the Constructors' Championship on the third place, while Red Bull has 0 points.
Well, where to begin with HAAS? I mean, they've obviously had a rough time of it. Well, with the they can never seem to get a good sponsor. They're always there's always some issue. They've had Nikita leave, and I think they kind of deserve it though. They said they were going to concentrate on the 2022 regs and the car. They were going to go with that. We're going to write off 2021. So they deserve it. And I think they've got fortunate with the Ferrari power unit, which seems to be very effective. You can see all the Ferrari powered cars are doing certainly better than the Mercedes powered cars. So
yeah,
well, except for the works team, obviously. But yeah, there's a trend there. It seems that power unit seems to be working better off the bat and giving the teams with, let's say, less aerodynamic cars, it's giving them an extra push. So yeah, I mean, you can't not feel good for them, really. I mean, with Kevin back and yeah, everyone wants to see Mick do well. Yeah, I mean, it's just really happy for them. That's my view.
I think everyone loved it. Everyone loved seeing Kevin Magnussen there and HAAS on the third place. Everyone loved it. I don't think there's any single person who are hating that fact. What do you think, Denzel?
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything everyone said so far. It's amazing to see HAAS have such an awesome comeback. You know, for many years they'd been through a lot of hardships, as Jay had touched on earlier. And huge statement of intent for them, because they could have just been another meme team at the back of the grid, just doing mileage and not really being ambitious. But for them to not only do so well in qualifying and then for them to echo that in the race, I think it's absolutely sensational. Hopefully it's going to boost the confidence in the team as well. I'm really, crossing my fingers that this isn't just a one-off and they can sustain this level of development and performance as the season goes by. But you have to be extremely happy for them, especially K-Mag too. He's not had any development or input with this current HAAS car. He's just come in and tried to fit in as part of the furniture, and he put in a really professional drive. So highly commendable, great performance from them.
At least for the sake of Gunther's smile.
Yes, Uncle Gunther would be smiling until the cows come home, and I'm
you know
super
what he
happy
said
for him.
yesterday in the interview when the journalist was saying, since you guys are on top 6, and then he corrected it. I'm sorry, but we are not top 6, we are top 5. I need to correct that. You need to mention that we are top 5. That was crazy. So okay, coming back to the cars, even during the qualifying, even Kevin Magnussen's car, they had a hydraulic issue, if I'm not wrong, and all these cars are actually still having issues, and this is the first time they had a huge long run, because even during practice sessions or during the qualifying sessions, most of the cars didn't show any issues in this manner, especially Red Bull. They were super fast and they didn't have any issues like these during those days, during those sessions. But yesterday, DNF. So what are your takes on that, Jay? And Denzel, for both of you.
Well, I don't know. You think that it would be something they would pick up on at some point during their long run simulations? I know it's not exactly the same, but
yeah,
it's difficult. It's really difficult, because at the moment Red Bull seem to be trying to hide behind this standardized part, this fuel pump that all the teams have been given from the same manufacturer. But as more and more of the I'd say the more experienced, technically minded journalists are looking into up, and it seems to be more down to the way that the cars are, their engines, the way their engines are either storing or using the fuel or something. I don't know. We still don't know, but some people have even some people have even discussed that perhaps it's the safety car made the engines and the fuel overheat. So that actually brought around the problem. So yeah, we don't know. We have to at this point, as we speak, we have to listen. We have to see what other reasons other people come up with, or whether or not Red Bull are going to be honest. But
exactly,
yeah.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to ask you, do you think they're going to be honest and letting the people know what exactly went wrong?
I mean, someone tweeted earlier, Checo Perez's tweets, where he said, kind of, oh, I'm fortunate to have an engine failure, and then he deleted that one, and he then said, oh, I'm fortunate to have a fuel problem, and it's just like, okay, all right. So it seems like they're trying to get on the same page, because Helmut Marko also blamed the standardized sort of the fuel pump. Christian Horner was a bit more, we don't really know, and I think at the moment they don't really know, and I think they're maybe trying to hide it. We heard Max's engineer being very coy about the problem, and Max was there, wasn't he, saying, what do you want me to do? And it's kind of like the engineer wasn't giving him anything. He wasn't saying anything, because either he didn't know or he didn't want to say where the problem was. So yeah, at the moment it seems like they're happy for people to kind of write the situation off as being a fuel pump issue, but at the same time I don't think it's that, and I don't think they even really know yet.
Denzel?
Yeah, I was just going to supplement Jay's points there as well, because as he correctly mentioned, there is a standardized fuel pump system that all the teams have, every single team. However, with this new E10 fuel, people have underlooked like how much of an impact that's had on the engines and how they burn fuel, because it's a lot more combustive, because it's diluted with a 10% ethanol content that's made from various sustainable materials. And essentially, as as Jay touched on there, the fuel reacts differently in different conditions. So if the car's idling under a safety car, you would think, oh, well, the engine's not like burning a lot of gas because it's much more slower speed. It's just chilling out. But actually, because the car is not getting the air it would be getting if it's going full speed, it's causing the fuel to like combust a lot more erratically than the teams expected. And another point or factor I'd like to add to this as well is the race. A Formula One journalist group, Ed Straw, has come out and said that Red Bull didn't actually do any full sim tests at Bahrain last week, and they didn't do basically a low fuel run either. So this is perhaps maybe the reason why they were very surprised and almost taken back by the kind of erratic behavior of the engine or the fuel system towards the end, because they had never simulated that in their tests, which you think big team like them, they would go and do their due diligence and make something like that possible. So a lot of pointing fingers are going to be happening at Red Bull, unfortunately for them. But if you don't do your homework, then sometimes it shows in the results. And for me personally, I was enjoying to see Max self-implode on the radio, as he didn't have the answers, the team didn't have the answers, and it was just a back and forth squabble between the two of them as to what was going on. And we also haven't mentioned, I think, that Max's steering also was damaged. They're alluding to the fact that when they tried to go for the aggressive third stop, that when they jacked the car up onto the jacking system and then dropped it, one of the track rods was slightly bent or tweaked, which is the reason why his steering as well was going wrong. So yeah, everything was just going wrong for Red Bull. In the UK, we have a series called 3 out of 4 Cats, but I think they need to rename it to 3 out of 4 Red Bulls, because 3 out of 4 of them had a disaster yesterday.
So what do you guys think about the car issues that Mercedes is currently facing? I mean, they've covered up a lot with the issues they used to have, but still they're suffering. And even Louis said that it's a fundamental issue that they'll be taking a lot more time than they're normally taking. And they need to go back and do a lot of work. And even though they won the podium yesterday and the 4th place, still they're a bit off pace, right? I mean, they're still off pace. So
massively.
What would you expect for them on the coming week? Because Jeddah is actually not an easy track at all. It's like, well, that's actually my favorite track for now, because it's more like impossible. So all the drivers are having a lot of issues, and we saw that last season. So what do you think Mercedes will be facing with a car with all these issues if they're not coming up with a fixing issue?
Well, Georgina, I'll step in ahead of Jay on this one. Lewis did an interview with Sky Sports yesterday, like a post-race paddock interview, and essentially saying what Mercedes will be focused on in the next couple of weeks is essentially their top speed, because as Jay pointed out, it seems that not only just Mercedes, but the Mercedes powered teams, so that's Aston Martin, McLaren, and Williams, they're really struggling in the high speed, straights. So that's one thing that they want to focus on, and could be related maybe to the E10 fuel, which is changing how the engine behaves. They've also said that they're suffering from a lot of tire degradation, which is funny because I've followed Mercedes since the Schumacher days. And even yesterday, when we were watching Lewis come out of the pits on a hard tire, you can see him struggling like Bambi on ice to put the traction down, unfortunately. So that's maybe something they'll want to focus on. And also, Lewis did also note that the car was suffering from a lack of rear downforce, which, again, I think we've got Bryson coming on in the imminent future. We've been talking about how the Mercedes is one of the cars that porpoises a lot more noticeably than the others. And of course, you could either get rid of that by stiffening the suspension or raising the ride height. But then when you raise the rear ride height of the car, you're essentially compromising downforce and the rear stability of the car as well, which makes it harder to drive. So these are all things that Mercedes will have to definitely work very hard to fix. And unfortunately, it might not be something which could just be done by a click of your fingers or a click of your heels. It's maybe a big upgrade package that they'll probably bring in the mid part of this season. And for now, they'll just be using whatever data they can to correlate that back in the simulator and the wind tunnel.
And Jay?
Yeah, I'm not 100% convinced they even fully understand their problems. They don't. It seems like they've kind of fundamentally misjudged what was going to happen with the approach they've taken, specifically the no side pods. It seems like they've. I think I remember reading that they, in the simulator runs, they were getting better performance from removing the side pods completely, but all that seems to have done is introduce drag, and then means they also have to take these measures that were just mentioned, like with the ride height and having a bigger rear wing, which is also increasing the drag, and so they've just lost this straight line speed. Throughout kind of practice, I thought they were sandbagging. I thought they had the engine. I thought that any deficit would be made up when they put the engine up, but then the engine, it had been turned down. They did turn it up, but then so did everyone else, and it didn't really give them any massive straight line advantage. They just had a lot of drag, and apparently the no side pod approach, you just have the wheels exposed. That's a big, I think aerodynamically, that's a big kind of flat object that's just causing a lot of drag. So they need something to channel the air around that. That's my limited understanding anyway. But I'm not sure how they can do that. They know that setup changes alone can't remedy the problem. So I think they're going to have to come back with restructured bodywork to some degree, whether that's putting the side pods back on it or something else to move the airflow around those rear tires, control the front tire wake. But who knows? They've got a lot of work to do, and I don't know if they even, amidst all of that, the drag issue, I don't even know if they properly understand the porpoising either. So I think it's going to take them a while. So hopefully Red Bull can just break down every race, and then that would
give Mercedes time. What do you guys think about the Ferrari? I mean, they've performed well during the practice sessions, even during the qualifying, and also during the race, and they're going to keep on maintaining all that on the coming weeks ahead as well. So but even though that, they do say that they're having smaller issues, but I don't think it's a humongous issue like the Mercedes or the Red Bulls are facing. So what's your take on that?
Well, I'll go first and say it's beautiful to have the return of the Scuderia sauce, the prancing horse, back at the top, because Ferrari obviously have quite a legacy in Formula One, and for them to have struggled in the last couple of years, a lot of neutral fans would have felt a way about that. But again,
everyone's a Ferrari fan, I think.
Yeah, I think deep down inside, everybody has that kind of allegiance to them and stories that they've had as well. But yeah, throughout testing, they seem to be quite solid. But again, nobody wanted to kind of, I guess, put their hedges or bets on them too much. And then even in qualifying, Charles drove a perfect qualifying, put it on pole. And even during the race, he was defending from a hard charging Max Verstappen. And out of the two, I think Charles really showed how masterful his racecraft is, how intelligent of a driver he is as well, because, Max was trying to dive bomb him into the first corner, and Leclerc revealed at the end of the race that he was deliberately braking before the DRS detection point, so he could then get the slipstream in the DRS to re-overtake Max going into turn 3, which I thought was brilliant, really intelligent IQ racing from him to have that in mind, have the bravery as well to run side by side with Max, because we know that doesn't work out so well for many people. So amazing from him to propel the team forward like that. Sainz as well following quite closely too. You could hear in Sainz's voice that he was a bit disappointed, because he might have thought, based on last year when he outscored Leclerc, that he'd be closer. But
do you think that they will be having an issue? I mean, the teammates issue, if this goes on 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2 like that, do you think they'll be having a partnership issue within themselves?
Inevitably, Georgina, because ultimately we don't know how long Ferrari will have this advantage over the rest of the pack. And when you're in a championship fight and you've never had a championship before, Leclerc's won races, but he's not been a champion yet. Sainz hasn't even won a race yet in his career, although he's achieved a lot of accolades. So if it was supposed to be them at the top, I feel that maybe you could have a similar thing like Nico Rosberg versus Lewis, or maybe an inter-team battle as well. We'll just have to see how things pan out. But ultimately, if they're going to be sensible, I think that they just need to continue to work with each other to try and pull each other along and try and continue to develop the car rather than being complacent and, get into the inter-team politics, which, would only maybe set them back.
Jay?
Yeah, I agree. It's a fine line. At the moment, I think Sainz, rather than worrying about any in like friction within the team, he's more worried about I'm in that kind of second driver on merit, on pace position.
Yeah.
Like I'm the Bottas, not the Lewis. Not the Lewis Hamilton. I'm the Valtteri Bottas kind of. And I don't mean that necessarily disrespectfully. It's just we see this pattern where one driver will just have, and then over race distance that really shows itself, and it shows itself between Max and Checo, Lewis and Valtteri. I haven't really seen Lewis and George yet, but if this continues, then yes, I think Carlos's problem is just the fact that he's kind of going to be relegated to this number 2 position just on the fact that he doesn't have the pace to challenge Max, and then he's just fighting with Perez over third place. But I think
continue, Jay.
I think Charles has done brilliantly. I think he, as was touched on, he raced very well in a calm, measured and intelligent way that you wouldn't necessarily have expected, where he's just been thrust to the front of the grid. You'd think that perhaps he'd be feeling more pressure and he'd drive more like Max does, where it's just like go for it and don't think too much about it. But he outthought him and he outraced him. We could all see it, and it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it, and as has been mentioned, it's great to see Ferrari back up there, because that's where they should be. That's where everybody wants them to be. So yeah, long may it continue.
But it's actually bad news for McLaren, because neither of the cars were performing well yesterday or the qualifying.
Absolutely. McLaren, they've gone from looking at Ferrari as their closest competitors and who they're fighting with on a championship level, and now they're just nowhere near them. They're not even in the same. I think McLaren don't have a rival at the moment. They're just fighting themselves. I think I saw a meme yesterday. Orange is the new HAAS. It's cruel, but apt.
But do you think that these cars are actually struggling? I mean, they're not supposed to be struggling in this manner, because even McLaren is not HAAS or Alfa Romeo. I'm not condemning any teams, but still, McLaren has a lot of good drivers, great drivers actually, even championships, and they were on the top level, and suddenly they are having a lot of issues and they're not even performing well. And looking at the name McLaren, I don't think they are supposed to be in this manner. I don't know what's wrong they've done, but I mean, for a team like that, they're not supposed to be having these issues. These are like the beginners issues, some sort of a way.
I think McLaren have been underperforming for years, to be honest. I don't think they adapt very well to things. I don't think they move quickly. I don't think they have just the same level of expertise as the other teams. I don't think they have for a while. They were struggling. Obviously, they were unlucky when Honda first came back and the engine wasn't there. And they were coming out with all this stuff about if the engine was better, aerodynamically, our car is brilliant. And then they got, I think they went to Renault, and it's like, nope, you're still not really there. And I think towards the end of the previous sort of car era, if you want to describe it that way, McLaren were kind of getting there, and they have talented drivers, and they had what was the most powerful engine in the Mercedes engine. But yet now regs have changed and everything, and they don't have the engine to just get them through. Like, they obviously need to do hard work around that engine in the way that Mercedes Works team have to even just be sort of third quickest car. And yeah, I think we're sort of seeing a similar thing with Aston Martin too. It's like they can't rely on the engine. Their aerodynamics are exposed, and they just haven't really adapted very well. And you can understand that more with Aston Martin, I think, because they're a newer team. Classic McLaren underperforming, not making a good car. And I think this has been a problem for them for a while.
I think for McLaren, what happened was, in a simple way, when the movie started making sense to them, the movie ended and another new movie started. What do you think, Denz?
Yeah, well, I agree with all the points you guys have made, and just to kind of add context to it too, McLaren are going to be under immense amount of pressure because I don't know if you guys have been watching the Netflix documentary, but last year they had to basically find some new investors to try and keep the team afloat. So that was quite hard for Zak Brown. And then also one of their biggest investors or part shared owners of the company are from Bahrain. They're Bahraini owners that own stakes in McLaren. So for them to perform so poorly in their second race, it's going to put them under immense amount of pressure. But where I'm going to give McLaren some bail, and I won't be so quick to kind of be so critical of them, is that maybe it's a very track specific thing with the car, because in Barcelona, which is its own circuit, the car was a bit more competitive there, a bit more reliable, didn't have the same issues we're having in Bahrain with the brake ducts and so forth. We also have to bear in mind that Ricciardo's just returned from COVID, and we've seen how that also affects drivers, because Lewis also mentioned that he was really out of it when he contracted it in 2020, and it's not something he'd wish upon other people. And unless you're a Red Bull driver, it seems most people don't want to drive with COVID. So that also is, point to take in. And yeah, just I know that they're going to be really working hard to try and make it better, and I wouldn't write them off so early, but of course it's concerning for them, because you wouldn't expect a McLaren to be so low behind, and like Lando basically almost a lap down halfway into the Grand Prix. It's unacceptable by their own standards.
Okay, so speaking of COVID regulations, let's talk about regulations and the new race director and the Human Era Championship. And the champion, the Human Era champion. So first, we saw the Chinese driver, Zhou Guanyu, his the lap time got deleted, but Checo Perez, his lap time was not deleted, if I'm not wrong. So there was an issue with that. What was that about?
It was deleted officially, but it just didn't make its way to the information that we could see watching the race, or indeed the commentary team. Martin Brundle on Sky was saying the same thing, that it's not been deleted. Maybe they didn't see it, but actually behind the scenes it had been deleted. And then I think Perez did another lap anyway, so it didn't end up mattering. But yeah, I think it's just I don't know, maybe technical glitch or a human error.
Or maybe a human error. Yeah, definitely human error. Do you guys believe and think the new race director will actually follow the rules without any human errors, producing human error championships?
Well, it's a tough line, because on one side, mistakes are always going to be made by people, even people in higher positions like them. You would like to think that obviously with two new race directors and the VAR system that they have now, that those mistakes are going to be less frequent, and they'll go through like a process of determination. And I think we saw that yesterday, because we saw a first lap incident between Ocon and Mick Schumacher. In my humble opinion,
5-second penalty was.
Yeah, and in my opinion, I feel that they were a bit harsh on Ocon, because whilst he did spin Mick, he had half of his car alongside Mick, and Mick squeezed him onto the curb and he had nowhere else to go. But having said that, like, these new stewards, they've made it abundantly clear they don't want to see that crap. They don't want any like wheel-to-wheel combat like that, or a car being spun on the first lap, even if it is the first lap. So their approach in some regards seems to be a lot more strict, even when maybe last year that sort of incident might have just been looked over, or it might not have been looked on so frowningly. So definitely, I think you can see a change, but you're right as well, Jorgina, in saying still lacking a bit of consistency there, or at least if they could be a bit more transparent with the way they distribute corner cutting warnings and off track limit warnings as well, then that would be better for the fans too, because the graphics don't make it abundantly clear either when sometimes time gets deleted or something's happened.
What's your take on the FIA report, Jay, the Human Error Championship?
Yeah, I think the report was never a product of a serious, legitimate investigation. I think investigations, when they're conducted by third parties, I mean, if we look at politics, an inquiry into something generally will just look for the truth. Here, I don't think they've really been interested in doing that. I think they've just been taking time to fabricate something in a way, in a manner that kind of explains away things, ignores other things, and just says, okay, well, we're gonna do better. We're gonna look at things in a different way. We're gonna restructure. We've got these new stewards, but nothing about it gives me any confidence that they really undertook that with the intention to release an honest report, because they haven't looked into, for a start, who kind of rubber stamped Massey's mistake, and in doing so they quoted the rules incorrectly. It comes back to what was being said before as well about the stewarding and the overall kind of goal of I think the FIA and the race directors. I don't think a lot's changed. I think the new race directors will be on their best behaviour. I think they want to say all the right things in terms of, with regards to track limits, where they said the white line is the track limit. That's the end of it. None of this negotiating where you can go off track and the rest of it. The track is the track, the end. And of course, everyone celebrates that and thinks, yes, this is what we need. But I still don't think really that the overall objective has changed. And the overall objective is to make sure that the entertainment value is treated with more importance than the actual sporting integrity. I mean, nothing about the report or anything that I've seen from anyone so far suggests that they even accept that they've been prioritizing entertainment over sport. And they absolutely did. And I think they'll continue to do so.
Do you think DTS was the issue for the whole sports to go bonkers, or was it a good excuse for them to do whatever the hell they want?
I think Drive to Survive, the whole Netflixification of the sport, I think it's a wider symptom, if you like, of what's been happening to F1 anyway. I wouldn't blame DTS for anything. I just think that DTS is what happens when you have a sport go in the direction that it's going in, which seems to be to prioritize drama and entertainment over sporting integrity. And this is why we have almost all the journalists, pundits, using terms like deserved and the rest of it in place of just acknowledging that the actual result wasn't legitimate and wasn't sporting and wasn't fair. I just think you can't, on a professional level, people should be playing away illegitimacy by saying that it was just deserved. Like, people in the position that they're in, a professional position, just shouldn't be justifying results like that. And whilst that still continues, I just think the sport has its priorities wrong.
Denzel, what do you think about, apart with the report, do you think it was fair enough? I mean, obviously no one is thinking that it's fair enough, but still, what's your take on the report? And also then I want to ask this question from both of you. What do you think about Alfa Romeo, given the fact that they're actually within the 10 spots for the drivers, and the performance of the Chinese driver as well?
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that question, Georgie. I'll start with the first one. In relation to whether I thought the report was fair, clearly not. Hell no. To elaborate on that point further, to me, it was just a bunch of waffle. It was so much waffle, I thought I was in a Waffle House, because they didn't address anything correctly or anything, didn't acknowledge like the true like defect that happened with the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. I think Jay's been absolutely spot on with the points that he's made, and ultimately I just saw it as them just doing a fact-finding exercise rather than them actually talking about who's to blame, where does the liability fall, and what they're actually going to do about it in the future. But of course, I think it was to be expected because they don't want, even though the championship is tainted, although it is corrupted, although the result isn't valid, they know that commercially that is too much of a heavy burden to change or to appease now. So, of course, I feel the way that they were always going to go about this report was to dance around the elephant in the room and just kind of fill it up with loads of garbage that didn't really have any bearing on it, you know. And the really important crux of the kind of injustice that was committed, that you had essentially lapped cars and only the 5 lap cars in between Max and Lewis were moved. And then you had other cars, such as like Stroll, for example, that couldn't overtake the safety car. And they completely glossed over the meaning of the definition, where any lapped car should mean all lap cars. And they didn't really explain their reasoning behind that. And all they kind of said was a glimpse of, human error. But that's not good enough. You know, there's many jobs where you can't have human error. If you're a pilot for a big commercial Boeing 747 plane, you can't have a human error with something like that, because you have the lives of so many people in your hands, you know, and that's just not good enough. So to conclude that point, I don't think that it was satisfactory, but I think it was to be expected. And this, the way that they strategically placed this, literally minutes before qualifying, I think they knew that, you know, they would post this, people wouldn't be happy, but then people be distracted by the qualifying session, and you know, ultimately we just be left where we began to begin with. So there's my thoughts on that. And then with Alfa Romeo, yeah, you have to give them a lot of credit for how they performed in the first week. Both cars getting into the points, which couldn't be said the same for Red Bull, but we move. Just in relation to them, yeah, you have to say it's a feel-good factor for them. You could hear the emotion in Zhou Guanyu's voice for him to get that, because he had so much pressure on him. He's the first Chinese driver in sport, as we know. A lot of people would have been ready, just there to brandish him as a paid driver. And to me, I think it's the reverse. It's a driver that maybe deserves to be paid because of his performance there. He outperformed a lot of drivers that have more credential and experience than him, and drove a cool and collective race. Nice as well to see Bottas there, like waving to Lewis, and just that camaraderie there. No lost love between them. But to answer your question on the technical grounds, yeah, I think Alfa Romeo have a solid car. But where I don't want to get too excited with them is that we know that the results yesterday were somewhat circumstantial. And the biggest symptom that smaller teams like Alfa Romeo face is that they come to the start of the season with a really good package, and then they struggle to find a direction to develop the car to sustain the performance and advantage they have over the other team. So they can't get complacent. They have to continue pushing, and it will be in their own interest to do that, because we know that the higher a team finishes in the Constructors' Championship, the more prize money they get at the end of the season, which will help them to further the car in the future as well, along with attract sponsors and help the team be sustainable.
Jay?
Yeah, I concur, really. I don't have an awful lot to add, other than just it was very nice to see Bottas qualify as well as he did, showing that was a strength of his, and giving some sort of context to how things have been with him versus Lewis for the time in they were teammates at Mercedes. Saying that, he also showed that on the start of the race, perhaps not as racy and as brave maybe to hold position, but in the end, with the retirements and everything else, he finished 6th. And like we say, both cars in the points. It's all about now just making the most of it, whilst especially the Mercedes power cars are going to try and catch up with their developments.
And speaking about the paid driver, I think the issue when it comes to Zhou Guanyu was while he got the seat as a paid driver, the champion of the F2, who is Oscar Piastri, he didn't get a seat for F1. So most of the people were furious because of that, because the guy who is a champion didn't get a seat, and the guy who was not the champion, I think Guan Yu placed third, if I'm not wrong, on F2, got a seat by paying. So that was the issue for hating the Chinese driver when it comes for the paying part. I think that played a huge role, I guess.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's never good when you see a champion not get a seat because of money. You would think that he would be able to get the backing for a start, because obviously the ability is there. However, this seems to be the way of the sport, and it seems all the time you end up with drivers taking a seat that they perhaps don't deserve over someone else. The one that I remember being quite angry about was when Lance Stroll takes Sergio Perez's seat away. And they tried to sort of spin it as well. Vettel's coming in and he's obviously going to instead of Sergio Perez, and you just think, well, it's not about that though, is it? It's about nepotism and Lance Stroll having a seat that he's not. But what can you do? It's part of the sport. It's always going to be part of the sport.
Karma, I think when we speak about karma, yesterday the karma was trending, but I'm going to talk about the karma because Kevin Magnussen, I think he was kicked because of the contract with Nikita Mazepin, and then he got kicked out, and then Kevin came back, and HAAS is on the third place for the Constructors' Championship. So that was a mistake that they did earlier, and then here we are with the results.
Well, Jorgina, I could say that this is the real L plan. None of that Fernando Alonso business at Alpine. This is the L plan, because maybe you never know. Maybe there's a conspiracy that Gunter knew that HAAS needed an injection of money, so maybe he just said to K-Mag, listen, my bro, just take a year out of the sport, go and have a baby, just go and enjoy life for a bit. In the meantime, we're gonna get this crazy Russian guy and his father to inject some money into our cause. And then, you never know, we'll find any excuse we can to just basically dump him before the start of the new regulations. And then boom, we're going to give you a car that's even better than the one that you had when you were in the sport. And then you're going to come back and do the absolute madness. So absolutely. And just on the pay driver thing as well, it's tough because there really is a fine art balance with that. And whilst I do feel really sorry for Oscar Piastri, it probably is because of his ties with Alpine, because he is an Alpine Academy driver, so ultimately it'd be Alpine that would be looking to find a seat for him. The issue that Alpine have is that they're the only manufacturer on the grid where they don't have more than one team. Mercedes obviously supply themselves and 3 other teams. Honda, in the background, Red Bull supply themselves, and obviously AlphaTauri, and Ferrari obviously supply themselves, and then HAAS and Alfa Romeo. So maybe if there was a second team, if Renault or Alpine were willing to make that investment, there'd be a space there for Oscar. And then secondly of all as well, people I think should put more pressure on Alonso too, because it's people like Alonso that have complained about Formula One for a long time, complained about Lewis, said that the sport was becoming too boring and predictable. He was the one behind the campaign for basically these new cars. And in the first race of the season, he gets absolutely demolished by his younger teammate Esteban Ocon in a car that was less superior, because I want you guys to remember as well, the Alpine had, Ocon more specifically, had damage to his side pod on the first day of practice on Friday, meaning he had to revert to old spec side pod, which was potentially slower than Alonso. And he still managed to beat Alonso even with a 5-second penalty as well. So people need to put pressure on the older drivers like Alonso too, that have a lot of clout and a lot of things to say, but they don't have enough money to bank the check on the track. And if he can't do that, then I think his space should be given to somebody like Oscar Piastri as well.
What are your takes on the pit stop strategies that Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari used?
I'll go for this one then.
Yeah.
We had a range because ultimately it was Mercedes that actually pulled the trigger when they brought Lewis in for the hard tires to try the undercut. But I believe we were using the hardest compounds that exist. So that's the C1 tire. That's the hardest Pirelli they make, Jorgina. So with that, unfortunately, when Lewis came out, you couldn't get the temperature in them because they're so hard. Like if you have a really hard block of cheese and you put it in the microwave, it's obviously going to take longer to melt than it would the softer cheese, like you would with a softer compounded tire. Love my cheese analogy there. Go halloumi cheese as well. But to bring it back, yeah, you had Mercedes basically try to go on a hard tire, maybe to do a one stop. But unfortunately, the performance just wasn't there with the tire. It was too slow. You then obviously had Max go on to some brand new soft tires and Leclerc do the invert strategy. So he went on to some used soft tires and we saw the undercut bring Max a lot closer to Leclerc than we had initially thought. But again, Leclerc just had Max in his back pocket, you know, like maybe a wallet. So he just seemed to kind of deal with the pressure quite well. Red Bull again said, okay, cool, we'll do the undercut again. And this is where we saw Max start to have a bit of an explosion on the radio because the team had specifically told him they were going to try and stick to the two-stop. And essentially with tires, the most damage that is done to a tire, Jorgina, is in the first like couple of laps with a tire. When it's brand new, when it's shiny and spanky clean, that is when you could really destroy the tire in the opening laps of its life. So they were telling Max, listen, think about the long plan here. You need to try and do a two-stop. And Max, being as ignorant and, you know, as hot-headed as he is, he said, no, leave me alone. I know what I'm doing. Don't tell me what to do. I'm never, ever listening to you guys again. I went slow on the outlap with these tires, and it didn't put me any closer to Leclerc. So, you know, that put them on the back foot. And then we saw Red Bull. They're really desperate to try and win that race and try and be the ones leading the championship. So they took a gamble with a free stop, and this is arguably where Max's steering got damaged, maybe with the way they dropped the car off the jacks. But ultimately as well, it just seemed that Ferrari were just cool, measured, composed, which we love to see from Ferrari because we meme them quite a lot for having the master plan, as we always talk about, and Spinola and all these other memes. But it just seemed that whatever Red Bull could do, Ferrari could do better, and that was the case. So we saw a lot of different strategies there, and it was interesting to see how they were going about racing with this new 18-inch tire.
Okay, so last question for both of you. What are your predictions for Saudi Jeddah this coming week?
I don't know. I don't think Mercedes are really going to be any quicker. On one hand, it's a street track, but on the other hand, it is very quick. So I think again they're probably looking at 5th and 6th, whilst it comes down Ferrari at the front. I do think that it's going to be interesting to see if Red Bull get on top of their issue and whether or not the issue happens again. I predict a safety car, at least one safety car, and if their fuel and their engine and the rest of it doesn't cope with a long period of time at slow speed waiting for accidents to be cleared up, then maybe they're going to double DNF again, and that would be I don't think Twitter could cope with it. I don't think I could cope with it. It would. I don't know how much more I could gloat in that situation compared to how much I've been gloating over the last day. So yeah.
Denz, your take.
Yeah, similar to Jay's there as well. I think Mercedes are going to be doing a lot of data analysis and findings, and whilst I wouldn't write them off, I'm not gonna sit here ignorantly and say, P1, P2 dominance. I think they're really gonna have to dig deep, but anything's possible with Mercedes, and still we rise. So I love that motto, and I think we should go with that mantra. But realistically, you got to say that it's really between Red Bull and Ferrari. As Jay correctly alluded, Red Bull are gonna have to get to the bottom of these fuel system issues that they're having, because it's not good enough. And I think the world literally, it's funny that the company is called Red Bull, but the drinks are not giving them too much energy on the track, man. I don't know what's happening there. But
they're clipping the wings, man. They're clipping the wings.
Exactly. The wings are looking quite fraudulent. But yeah, I mean, to be fair to Red Bull, the car looked quite slippy in a straight line. And when Max did have the DRS on Leclerc, he was able to, like follow him quite closely. So I'd expect them to be strong there. You also have to say that Horner used to like gloat about Max being quite strong, and he gloated last year saying that Max was brilliant in the technical parts of Jeddah, and how he drove the brilliant lap, the lap that he never completed. So I'm going to put all the pressure on Red Bull to come back swinging this week, because if they don't, that's going to be a big dent in their championship fight with the contenders. But obviously, big respect to Ferrari as well, and I hope that they continue to go with this measured, calculated, intelligent way of driving, and we're going to see battles. But as Jay mentioned as well, it's a street circuit, it's very unforgiving. If you make any mistake there, you're going straight to the scene of the accident. So we might see many safety cars, and then it will be interesting to see how that works out. And also, this is the first street circuit we're going to be driving on with these new cars. So how would the new cars fare around the street circuit that's maybe a bit more unconventional, more bumps, more narrow? How is that going to affect the racing? So lots of unknowns and an unknown quantity, but we're very excited to see.
Thank you so much, guys, for your time and joining this podcast. And I hope you guys join more and more episodes while the season is going crazy and wild, and hopefully more DNF. Thank you so much for joining, Jay and Denzel. Thank you so much. And as usual, we will be coming back with another episode for F1 series on Saturday with Bryson, hopefully after the qualifyings on Saturday, we will be doing a podcast with Bryson, so you will be having a lot of questions to ask. So thank you so much, guys, for joining in, and this is Jorgina Dona signing off from Stripping the Dipping with much love. Mwah.